And welcome to Cuick Talk, the show where compliance gets decoded. Each month, we break down the CyberAB town hall and translate it basically into plain English so companies can actually understand what it all means. Joining me today again is friend of the show, Kathryn Daly, our subject matter expert. Hello, Kathryn.
Hello.
And also, friend of the show, we have Ericka Todd, who's helping represent that perspective of people who, well, don't work in compliance all the time. Hello, Ericka. Nice to have you back.
Hello.
So, today we are covering the May Cyber AB Town Hall and what was probably the biggest topic of the month, external service providers. You may have heard them called ESPs. So, if you ever wondered what's the difference between an MSP and a MSSP and a CSP and all the other acronyms, don't worry, you're not alone. So let's jump into it. But before we get really deep in the details, Kathryn, I want to know, what was your biggest takeaway from this month's town hall?
The biggest takeaway is that companies don't actually understand what type of external service providers they're using. The CyberAB spent a lot of time discussing how companies need to properly identify their providers because different provider types have different compliance requirements.
So it's not just all terminology.
It's not all terminology, no. No, words have definitions and meanings.
So, Ericka, I want to bring you into this discussion. What was your reaction?
Mostly just from an entry level into advisory, I was more interested in how this would affect our clients, especially with the different roles that, as far as a lot of people are trying to go into assessments, is this new, like, not necessarily new definition, but actually bringing to light what different providers you are using, like how is it going to affect your actual assessment?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were kind of feeling the same way.
So fortunately for our clients, because Cuick manages pretty much everything, they're not going to have a lot of ESPs. So for our client base, it would affect them less. However, your average DIB company is using all sorts of service providers. And when they do their scoping, every single external service provider is going to have to comply with whatever controls apply to the capability that they're providing. So it really comes into play with DIB companies when they're scoping and starting to build out their compliance documentation.
So, Kathryn, the CyberAB said every company should ask 3 questions about their providers. What were those 3 questions?
So the 3 questions are you using an external service provider? Is that service provider a cloud service provider? And does that provider process, store, or transmit CUI or security protection data?
Well, that sounds simple enough.
So my biggest thing is just because of what I have been introduced to, it seems like it takes a lot of that guesswork for your everyday man out of like things you would have to worry about. Like we cover 83% of what you are actually like full spectrum. So whenever you're dealing with people that aren't going to have those kind of fail safes, is there one that is better than the other? Is it, I mean, typically everything is kind of moving more towards the cloud just because it's able to hold more space than like having, you know, your hardware in the other room and things like that. Is there an answer that would be the best choice?
So ideally using service providers that are cloud service providers and have a FedRAMP Moderate Equivalency is going to be your best bet, because that FedRAMP Moderate Equivalency is going to give your assessor a level of assurance that the security controls that apply to their capability have already been assessed by a 3PAO. So the cloud service provider would provide the OSC a letter of attestation, so that when you go for assessment, your assessor is not going to have to reassess all of the controls that apply to that capability.
Second follow-up question to that. For say that you aren't dealing with something that maybe your assessor, like we have assessors that are familiar with our environment, and I have heard that it cuts assessment time quite a bit. If an assessor is going into an assessment and maybe the person they're assessing doesn't have that kind of environment, what kind of assessment time are they looking at?
They're looking at not having their assessment because they're not going to pass phase 2. They will get kicked back into phase 1 and they'll have what's called a false start. And I think I know a lot of the assessors have been talking about the prevalence of false starts. And I think a big reason is not scoping appropriately and not coming to their assessment with their external service providers' capabilities and security control implementation descriptions in their security documentation.
Kathryn, really the biggest discussion of this month was the difference between MSPs, your managed service providers, and your CSPs, your cloud service providers. Can you go deeper into that discussion?
Yeah, so the CyberAB explained that many organizations are calling themselves MSPs, but they may actually be CSPs, depending on how they're delivering their services. The determining factor really comes down to cloud computing.
And cloud computing, is that what's defined in NIST 800-145?
Yes. So NIST 800-145 is the official government definition of cloud computing. It has 5 characteristics to identify cloud computing: on-demand self-service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and measured service. If all 5 exist, then that provider is functioning as a CSP and should, according to DoD regulations, have at least a FedRAMP Moderate Equivalency. I will caveat this with the definition from NIST 800-145 is from 2011 and has never been updated.
So I have a quick question. If you're going into an assessment and your assessor actually finds that your MSP actually is moving more towards that cloud and they find that they do not have like a FedRAMP equivalency, what does that mean for your assessment? Would that also be a kickback as well? And be like, man, you better find something else.
I'm not sure. They may have the ability to decide if they want to proceed and just treat the external service provider as an ESP that does not have a FedRAMP Moderate Equivalency. And then they would just have to assess every single control associated with whatever capability that ESP is providing.
So MSP, CSP, all the acronyms, why should contractors actually care about this?
Because different provider types have different requirements, and if a provider is scoped incorrectly during an assessment, then it's going to create issues. You're going to get a false start. You're not going to make it to your assessment date. They're going to give you a false start. You're going to have to go back, fix your documentation, and reschedule your assessment.
Ooh.
Do those things, like, I know that you keep calling it kind of a kickback. Does that count as like a fail, or is there just like a certain amount of days that you have to maybe meet those expectations?
It doesn't count as a fail, I think, and they don't really give metrics on how many OSCs have failed. But I think they count it as a false start, where you just basically have to reschedule your assessment. Based on your contract with your assessor, there may be additional costs incurred by having a false start and having to reschedule your assessment. But that's a contracts issue.
So I want to shift gears to my favorite part of the town hall, which is where they go over the whole ecosystem. And of course, they did their ecosystem update. Was there anything notable this month for the ecosystem?
The ecosystem has continued to grow. It is still exceeding expectations. We have nearly 1,400 level 2 certifications, almost 1,000 CCAs, and 560 lead CCAs. And then over 400 RPOs, so that's registered provider organizations. Steady growth across the ecosystem for sure.
I mean, I think that's a really good sign that all these numbers are continuing just to be pumped up.
They are. And, a lot of people are talking about, we don't have enough assessors. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing that our clients are able to get assessments I mean, not tomorrow and not next week, but it's also not next year or the year after. So I think the assessors are seeing steady work, but I don't think we are having a huge bottleneck with not having enough assessors like a lot of people are saying.
So to wrap all of this up, let's say you're a contractor. What should you do right now?
Inventory your providers, understand what it is that they're doing for your system, understand which providers are going to be touching CUI and which ones would be more of a security protection asset. And make sure that when you're putting together your documentation, you're scoping those providers appropriately, getting their information on how they meet the controls that are associated with their capabilities, and having all of that ready for your assessment.
Ericka, what about you? Do you have any final takeaways?
For me, it's just been really interesting, especially working within the Cuick Track environment, seeing the kind of differences in what clients may be choosing between, like, if you choose to have advisory services, it kind of seems like it takes a big load off of your back. And so you're not taking on as much, because even working with clients in the environment that we have, like, we're still dealing with a lot of information. I can't imagine trying to tackle this on and scoping correctly whenever you're trying to do this on your own.
So let's close out with the big takeaways. I mean, number one, not all external service providers are the same. Number two, MSPs and CSPs, they have different requirements. Three, companies need to understand who is handling their CUI. And four, proper scoping always matters. So that is it for Cuick Talk today. Kathryn, Ericka, I want to say thank you so much for joining us again. And for everyone else out there, thank you so much for helping to code compliance with us on another episode of Cuick Talk. Until next time, stay curious, stay compliant. Bye, everyone.
Cuick Talk, where compliance gets deep.